All right, before we go into the crime statistics for the month, I want to talk about the weather situation. As you've all been seeing, it keeps evolving. At this moment, we are still in a lot of the parts of the city experiencing just rain or, a little bit of sleet, but nothing that has fully become snow in some parts of the city, at least. Every part of the city, as everyone knows, experiences somewhat different realities, but the storm is certainly arriving later than some of the projections we had previously. We are tracking it very closely. The National Weather Service does have a winter weather warning in effect. That will be in effect until 4 a.m. today. So here's what we know. We expect the storm to intensify between now and the early evening. We expect more wind. Right now it's not too windy. We expect the winds to increase, gusts as high as 35 to 45 miles per hour. Now, this one is going to be different than some of the other storms we've seen. Again, slow developing. When it gets going, we'll see, we think, typically snow in the 1 inch to 2 inch an hour range. 1 inch an hour, not too bad. When you get to 2 inches an hour and more, it gets to be a much greater challenge, particularly for the sanitation department. And I want to say at the outset, they do an outstanding job. They've really been stars in these last storms, clearing the streets. But you get over 2 inches an hour, it gets harder and harder. For the beginning, we think it'll be less than that, but then there will be a point later where we could experience a very intense burst of snow. This phrase says a lot, thunder snow, and that could be between 2 and 4 inches per hour. Again, that we could get that. We're not sure, obviously, and it could be for a limited time. It could be for a somewhat longer time. We do expect the main body of the snow to taper off between 7 and 8 p.m. The citywide projection has changed several times in the last 24 hours. Right now, the broad citywide projection is in the 8 inches to 12 inches range. Again, you'll see a lot of difference depending on the part of the city. Generally, more accumulation in the northern parts of the city, less in the southern parts of the city. The highest we've seen any projection of at this point is 16 inches. Again, I think that's a small chance we'll see that anywhere, but there may be a few parts of the city where we see that. Right now, again, the places that are going to see more snow are northern Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. Less snow in Staten Island, southern Queens, and Brooklyn. Look, everyone is monitoring and making adjustments as we go along. The snow plows are out. As the commissioner will tell you, they would love to get to work, but they can't until there's a certain amount of snow on the ground. But the salting has been happening. That will continue. Alternate side parking is canceled today and tomorrow. We have Code Blue in effect. The sanitation department, again, out full force, 2,400 workers, 693 salt spreaders, 1,600 plows waiting to go into action. In terms of focal points, we are going to make sure there is extra focus by the sanitation department around our schools to make sure they're getting a lot of attention as the end of the school day comes. And obviously for schools that have after school, that will continue until after school is out. NYPD will also be focusing on schools to make sure they're getting all the support they need in terms of directing traffic around the schools. The Rockaway ferry line is suspended as of 12:15 because of wind conditions, and Staten Island ferry is on a modified schedule as well. Want to now say to people, even though this has started as less of a storm than what we expected, later on it's going to be very intense potentially, particularly around the rush hour. So I want to urge all New Yorkers, use common sense. If you can leave work early and get home earlier, please do if you have that option. If you have to travel, use mass transit. If you have to be on the roads during the typical rush hours, go slow. Be careful, because it could be, again, a very intense burst of snow right around that time. Want everyone to please check on your neighbors, check on senior citizens, check on folks that have any medical conditions, make sure they get help if they need it. And for anyone who's dealing with a heat or hot water problem, please call 311. It's very important that gets reported right away so we can do something about it. Again, reminding everyone, for something like heat and hot water, call 311. For a real emergency, for a life-threatening emergency, call 911. Bottom line, don't take this for granted. Take it seriously. Take precautions, especially in that late afternoon, early evening time. Just a few words in Spanish, and then we'll take questions on the storm, and then we'll go back to the rest of the press conference. Es posible que la tormenta de hoy traiga nieve y fuertes vientos. Estamos tomando todas las medidas de seguridad necesarias y pedimos a los neoyorquinos que hagan lo mismo. No salgan a la calle, usen transporte público si deben salir y cuiden a sus vecinos. With that, I want to take any questions on the weather situation way back there.
Given the prediction for this burst of snow later and thunder, this and that, do you still stand by your decision to keep the schools open, given dismissal, 3-ish?
Yeah, we have to make these decisions in real time. We had conversations yesterday afternoon, late yesterday after the 11 p.m. update from the National Weather Service. We talked this morning around 6 or 6:30 a.m. We kept getting, bluntly, information that didn't give us a consistent enough. I'm not saying this against the Weather Service. They're doing a fine job. I'm saying the information we had didn't point to a clear and consistent reason to shut down school. We have to remember when we shut down school, we create a lot of chain reaction. And I can speak as a parent. It's a tremendous dislocation to parents. For a lot of parents, whether they are two parents who are working or a single parent who's working, it creates a lot of challenges if the child can't go to school. They don't always have a good alternative for their child. We knew kids could get to school safely. Obviously, we've seen the storm developing late. We knew we would have them in good shape at school. Sanitation Commissioner and I checked in about what conditions would be like at the end of school. We felt confident about safety. After school, want to urge all parents, if you have your kids in after school and if you go to pick them up, you can get there earlier or take some extra time to get there, please do. Obviously, after schools, as per usual, we'll have personnel that stay as long as necessary to make sure every child is picked up. But in the scheme of things, when we balanced all the factors, yes, I think we made the right decision. We're getting new information now, but that decision has to be made at latest by early morning hours to reach parents in time. Okay, other questions on the storm? Yes, Mara.
Mr. Mayor, are there any NYCHA apartments that currently are out of heat or hot water?
We've got 4 developments. I'll give you the update. And I want to again remind all public housing residents, if you're having any problem with heat or hot water, call the Customer Care Center. As you know, we put some additional resources into speeding up response, and those are in play now. We have 4 buildings right now at Bushwick 1 and Bushwick 2. We expect both at this moment to be fixed in the course of the day. Independence in Brooklyn, also expected to be fixed in the course of the day. Beach 41st Street in Queens, also expected to be fixed in the course of the day. And 2 of those are hot water only problems at this moment. 2 of them are heat.
How many people is that?
I don't have that. Oh, you would ask that question. Okay. Bushwick 1, you're thorough. Bushwick 1, hot water is out. And Beach 41st, hot water is out. From what I have here, Marcia, we don't have a heat problem in either place. Again, we expect those both fixed today. The 2 with heat problems are Bushwick 2 and Independence, both in Brooklyn. Yes?
As you mentioned, depending on where you live in the city, depends on how much snow you'll get. So southern parts of the city, maybe just an inch. But the northern part could get that 8 to 10 inches. Are you sending extra crews to northern Manhattan, North Bronx? Because even this past snowstorm, people in the North Bronx complained that they didn't get enough services up there.
Yeah, Dean, I appreciate the question because you will remember before my time, there was a lot of controversy on this question, and I was one of the people raising a critique about it as public advocate that the city has to be able to move resources around as needed. I've seen this in previous storms, particularly, you remember we had the biggest blizzard in history during our term, And I thought the commissioner and her team did a great job moving assets around as needed. So, Commissioner, what are your plans for today?
So at this time, because the forecast has been shifting, we are not anticipating 1 inch anywhere in the city at this point. We are anticipating 8 to 12 citywide. So we have not at this point moved equipment, but that will be dependent on whether or not the forecast changes again or whether or not we are seeing more significant issues in any part of the city, and then we will adjust.
What should people do, though? It comes 24 hours later and they're still stuck, or there's ice or problems in their neighborhood.
So if there's ever any problem, you can call 311. We will not take complaints until we finish plowing and salting, but you should not, it won't be 24 hours.
Right,
We do not anticipate that it will be 24 hours for us to complete this job, but you should also definitely track what we are doing on Plow NYC. We will be clearing that map before the snow starts so that there isn't any sense that you got salted earlier today and we didn't come back. We're going to restart the clock once we really get to some plowable depths.
Hey, let me add to this. The important thing here is to look at the timelines in previous situations. So the worst storm ever was 27, 28, what was it, inches, do you remember?
Oh, no, it was like 28.9.
28.9, okay. So what we're hearing
I
here,
would have to-
typically around the city, 8 to 12 inches, nothing to scoff at, but this commissioner had to deal with a 29-inch snowstorm, the worst blizzard in New York City history, and the turnaround on that was unbelievable how fast they were managed, especially on the main roads, to get them open. And that was before she had the new equipment for the smaller streets, which she has an ample amount of now. She has more personnel. I think Commissioner Garcia and her team are doing extraordinary things. So if this remains true, and Mother Nature can throw a curveball either way, but if you're talking 8 to 12 inches in most parts of the city, with this kind of personnel already out salting and moving, and they have the whole overnight, they're going to do a great job. I don't think you're going to find many places that are snowed in the morning, but we'll be vigilant. Again, one thing people can do, and I know if you already went to work and you brought your car, you may not have a lot of choices. If you do have a choice, get home early, because the best thing we can do for our friends at the sanitation department is stay off the road if at all possible. Other questions on the weather before we move on? See if there's any other questions. Going once, going, yep.
I know you mentioned putting some extra resources for NYCHA, and I saw yesterday that they were deploying a situation room. Can you give us just a sense of what the city has done to beef up its response to potential boiler and hot water?
Yeah, the broad stroke is it's more of a war room approach, and obviously having additional resources both in terms of personnel at their disposal and equipment is going to be very, very helpful. So I'm very heartened that we're starting the day with only 2 developments having a heat problem. I'd like them to be 0, but only 2 is a good beginning. I also would say in the scheme of things, this temperature dynamic is better than what we've seen in past storms. I mean, I feel for the commissioner and her team, because some of those other blizzards, they were dealing with 0 or sub-zero temperatures and very, very intense winds. This one, the winds, not too bad. It'll get worse later on, but not too bad. But the temperatures right now, we're hovering between 30 and 35 degrees. That's actually very good for what they have to do for everything, for the effectiveness of the salt, but also in terms of all New Yorkers and their heat situation. Thank God it's not bitter, bitter cold out like it was, a couple months back. Yes, Rich.
Any sense that the tides and the winds and the arrival of the storm could conspire to create any coastal flooding?
I don't know, Joe, have you heard on?
Yeah, just localized flooding, nothing like last week. Last week was caused by the winds, the tides, and the moon, and we don't have that. We don't have that equation this time around. So you'll have some minor flooding in those areas that normally flood, but nothing like last week. Yeah.
Okay, last call on the weather. Okay, let's turn to Commissioner O'Neill.
I think we're going to change some seats first.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
A lot of instructions. Commander, please do not touch. Do not touch.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, still morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. You'll hear from Mayor de Blasio again in a couple moments. And then Dermot Shea will give you the February crime figures for you. Before I continue, just want to, Donovan Richards, the chair of the Public Safety Committee and the City Council, is with us here this morning. So Donovan, thanks for being here. Bob Boyce has a couple cases he wants to talk about. I think he has two. So the clock's kind of winding down on Bob. I know he's got one more press conference after this, crime press conference. I just want to make sure that I have as many opportunities as possible to get it right. So Bob and I came out of the same academy class in January 1983. I think he's done sometime in April. I just want to publicly acknowledge all the great work he has done for this city over those 35 years. Wherever I go, I talk about crime fighters, premier crime fighters in the United States. And Bob is certainly one of them. We're going to miss him. Bob, thank you for everything. I'll have another opportunity to do this again in April. Hopefully, this sets the stage for your farewell. It's going to be strange not having you here with these press conferences, making just a great contribution. And once again, the work you've been doing as chief of detectives, I think is unparalleled. So thanks again, Bob.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Was that sufficient? Was that good?
Yeah, I thought that was excellent. If you're scoring at home.
So just to get back to be serious just for a while here. This morning, the NYPD is also thinking about the brave members of the police department in Clinton, Missouri. It's a town of a little more than 9,000 residents, and I think they have about 21 police officers. Last night, one of those police officers was shot and killed after responding to a 911 call with a woman screaming in the background. A man inside the home killed the 30-year-old officer and also shot and injured two of his fellow officers. And last August, just 7 months ago, another Clinton police officer was shot and killed during a traffic stop. I'm sure that those brave officers, just like every member of the NYPD we've lost over the years, believed in the possibility of making this a safer world, believing in being part of something larger than themselves. Cops are just regular people who know that everything our government stands for starts with public safety. And that's why violence against the police and what we represent is a dishonor to civilized society. In fact, about 2 o'clock this morning, while much of the rest of New York City was sleeping, one of our uniformed Transit Bureau police officers was attacked inside the Columbus Circle subway station in Manhattan by a man who hopped a turnstile. Before he was handcuffed, the 35-year-old man was able to land a couple of blows to the officer's face and also bit him on the thigh. Our officer will be okay, but it speaks to a larger issue. Who knows what this guy's motivation was, but without a doubt, he saw us as the bad guys. Here we are in 2018, and as I said last July at the funeral of murdered detective Mia Soda's familiar, there is unquestionably a creeping apathy among the public about the work and role of its dedicated police officers. I think of it this way, and I said this before, you don't really notice the lights are on until they go out. If we do wrong, we are vilified, and if we do right, sometimes we're vilified also. And I get it. When cops show up, it's not always good news. We write tickets, we make arrests. We have to notify people that their loved ones have been killed. But there's little attention paid to the positive changes in policing in general, and in this police department in particular, no matter how effective they may be. Listen to these crime numbers today. Think about how many lives have been saved already this year, about how many families have been kept intact over the last 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. Police officers in New York City and across this country do fantastic things every single day for millions and millions of people. When a whole group of people is demonized, whether that group is defined by race, religion, or by occupation, you get acts of hate committed, often against the very people who stepped forward and made a promise to protect the public. I'm not looking for sympathy, just understanding, and the full and willful engagement of the public we serve. The civility of our society balances on a knife's edge, and the 36,000 uniformed members of the NYPD are just regular people who made a selfless decision to help maintain that balance. And again, as I did last July, I'm asking the public to make a commitment to support its police and to work with us. Commit to watching the backs of those you call when you're scared, those you call when you're in trouble. We know you need us, and we certainly need you. We won't turn away from criticism. I never will. I've been a cop for 36 years. I'm one of 7 kids. I live on it. I thrive on it. Because we know that comes hand in hand with making the safest big city in America even safer. But we want all our neighborhoods to be safer places for our children, for our elderly, and for ourselves. Because no one knows what's going on a street or a block better than those who live and work there every day. Public safety is a shared responsibility. You must participate. That's how our neighborhoods will keep just getting better. That's how we're going to keep driving crime down and disorder. That's how we're going to find our way forward together. That's what New York policing is all about. Mr. Mayor?
Very well said, Commissioner. Thank you very much, and just want to offer my condolences as well to the people of Missouri and to the family of the officer lost. And want to amplify something very important the Commissioner said about all New Yorkers having the backs of our police officers. I think that is one of the most fundamental realities of neighborhood policing. It creates a real two-way street and a very virtuous circle that our community residents know the police are there for them, and our officers know the community is there for them as well. And that's something we really need to keep building. That's why neighborhood policing is working. We're going to be talking about what happened in the month of February 2018, and I'm very, very proud to report that all the good people around me and all the men and women of the NYPD have once again achieved something great. But the fact is that neighborhood policing is changing the dynamics and the environment and causing more and more understanding of that common humanity. When someone puts on that uniform to protect us, they're a human being who made a very brave choice. And I think more and more the residents of our communities, of all communities, are seeing that. So this is my hope for the future of this city, that we are one of the places that helps to light that beacon of mutual understanding and cooperation between police and community, and I certainly think we're off to a strong start. I want to thank the Commissioner. I want to thank First Deputy Commissioner Tucker and Chief Monahan, the whole leadership team, for all they do. I want to thank Chair Donovan Richards for being here. Thank you for your crucial partnership. I want to also begin the cavalcade of accolades for Bob Boyce. This man's a human computer. I don't know how he does what he does. I watch him get up there every time with these extraordinary facts, the absolute command of a wealth of information. And I have to imagine a lot of New Yorkers respond as I do, and it makes them feel a lot of confidence when they hear that command of the facts and that incredible devotion to getting to the truth and finding the perpetrators in each and every case. And Bob, your batting average has been pretty amazing.
Thank you, sir.
So this guy's done a lot for the city of New York, and he's going to be sorely missed, and you've set the bar very, very high. So don't blush, because we'll be doing this a lot in the next weeks. I just want to say quickly, I've said that we're living in a very special moment. When you're in the middle of a special moment, sometimes it's hard to see it. But I think we can all agree what happened in 2017 was unprecedented. And the numbers, the under 300 murders, under 800 shootings, just changed everything. Safest year in modern history of this city. I have used different comparisons to get the point across, but here's a new one today. And as baseball season is almost upon us, I'm going to speak about a New York City team that I feel very good about. And you'll appreciate it, because if you look back in history, the last time the city was this safe and the last time we had this few homicides, rookie center fielder Willie Mays was patrolling the field at the Polo Grounds for the New York Giants, to put in perspective again how much the NYPD has achieved and how historic this achievement is. So in February of 2018, the NYPD, working with community partners, added to this record of achievement. And let me compare February this year to February last year. Again, last year, the record-setting year, but the NYPD is proving they can go farther. So total crime down 1.6%, shootings down 7.5%. Again, this is February to February comparison. Murders down 41% this February compared to last February. Remarkable numbers. When Chief Monahan made the point the day he was formally promoted, and he said, we're inventing a new type of policing, I think that's really important to recognize. This is working because a whole host of elements have been brought together, and they're having an impact that we've never seen before. And I always talk about the force projection that is created when you get hundreds of thousands of people who previously didn't necessarily feel the right connection to NYPD now are feeling that better connection to be on the side of our officers and help them in their work. It makes a huge, huge difference. So the other thing I want to emphasize before we hear the details, we've talked a lot about the reduction in stop and frisk and at the same time the reduction in crime. I think we need to talk more about the fact that the reduction in crime has been accompanied by a reduction in arrests. I've said to you 100,000 fewer, so year 2017, 100,000 fewer arrests than the year 2013 with much better results. Well, that goes on now. The month of February 2018, 6.2% fewer arrests than February a year ago, and crime keeps going down. So something is being proven here, and it's saving lives, it's keeping people safe, it's keeping officers safe at the same time. A few words in Spanish. El mes pasado nuestra policía llevó el crimen a niveles históricamente bajos otra vez. Esto fue posible gracias a nuestro plan policial de vecindad y la confianza cada vez mayor entre la policía y la comunidad. Wait, I'm missing a page. There we go. Esta confianza es la razón por la que vamos a seguir mejorando la seguridad en la ciudad grande más segura del país. With that, over to Dermot Shea for the details.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll run through some of the numbers, and as the Commissioner and Mayor said, you're seeing the evolution of policing in New York City here as the numbers, crime numbers continue to go down, and we continue to refine how we police this city. For the month of February, murders recorded in New York City was 14, down from 22. That's a 36% reduction. Rape, and there are some statistics that are going in the opposite direction, and rape is one of them. Rape, we recorded 122 rapes versus 88 for the prior February. That's a 39% increase. If you've been coming to these press conferences, this is a story that unfortunately has been told several months in a row. That's the 6th straight month. Beginning in September, we had an increase of less than 10 rapes. Once we hit October, we're seeing sizable increases. When you look at the rapes year to date in New York City, 38% are recorded as domestic rapes. Acquaintance rapes are 56%. And then the remaining are stranger rapes. Robberies, 5.6% reduction in the month of February, 930 versus 985. Felonious assaults were down nearly 2%, 1,342 versus 1,367. Burglaries were down over 7%, 833 versus 899. Grand larceny is the second category where we saw an increase, although much smaller than rapes. We had a 2% increase in grand larcenies for the month of February. We are down for the year to date. A couple categories that we have not spoken about before, certainly at these press conferences with grand larcenies, things like shoplifting, breaking into vehicles, and reproduced checks. 3 categories that really were driving the increase in that 1 month. Shoplifting, 24% increase, and that's grand larceny shoplifting. And we're seeing an increase in misdemeanor shoplifting as well. What's in common in these 3 things? We're seeing gangs move into those 3 categories, and it's not something that ordinarily you would attribute to gangs. But we are seeing, in addition to people sometimes breaking into cars to feed a drug habit, we're seeing people going around the city and outside the city and going to stores and organized theft rings. So reproduced checks, cars, and the shoplifting, 3 things that we're going to continue to work on. Stolen vehicles, down 12% in February. That number is just falling off the cliff as we move on. 348 versus 397. The total index crime, as the mayor said, for the month of February is down nearly 2%, 1.6%. That was, as I look across and I see Ed Delatorre in transit crime doing well, down. Jimmy Secreto over there, housing crime down as well, so a lot of positives. Shooting incidents for the month of February, 37 recorded, that's down from 40 last February, 7.5% reduction. So where are we? 2 months in, as we're coming out of winter, down overall crime, New York City, 4.5%. We're down 2 shooting incidents as of February 28th, a reduction of 22%. That's a typo. That is not right as I look at my numbers. I wish it was 22%, but we have a goal to reach. It's a reduction of 2, and it's 96 versus 98. And we're down 12 homicides through the first 2 months of the year. Reduction 34 versus 46, and that's a 26% reduction. As we've said before, and the mayor alluded to it, it's not in a vacuum, these crime statistics. We are at a now 25-year low in arrests. We are down over 4,000 arrests just this year. We're down 7.6% as of today in arrests, nearly 8% in arrests this year. And that's coming under 300,000 last year, which was a staggering number. When you look at certain types of arrests, and the one that we first and foremost mention is the gun arrests that are coming in. We're basically flat in gun arrests this year. But I can tell you firsthand, the commissioner mentioned an arrest where an officer was injured to start the meeting. Numerous arrests every day being affected by the men and women of the New York City Police Departments, both in uniform and the Detective Bureau, taking guns off the street. And it continues to be a priority as we sharpen the focus, keep pushing where appropriate, arrests down, and continue to drive down crime. Commissioner?
Bob, you got a couple cases you want to talk about?
We do.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're here to identify 2 persons wanted for crimes in New York City. We're seeking the public's help in locating them. First one is a homicide in the 4-9 precinct. Can you put up his picture, Brian? This person is Paul Corporan, a.k.a. Paul Santana. At the night of February 15th at about 10 o'clock at night, he stabbed to death Moises Palacios at 2300 Bronx Park East. This was a dispute over a work-related problem the two had. We're seeking him now. He has no prior arrest. That's why you have that picture there. We're looking for him. We've been looking for about several weeks now. So he stabbed someone to death in the Bronx. Anybody with any information, please call the TIPS number. We also have the next one, please. This individual, I think you remember we put this out yesterday. He punched someone rather brutally, punched someone out, I should say, on the number 1 train. And we put this out to the media. Crime Stoppers, again, we got a tip on. We were able to identify Jose Casing, a.k.a. Golden Boy. He's a 24-year-old male. He lives in Queens, New York. He has 15 prior arrests. We're looking to arrest him for that crime, for punching that person. Apparently unprovoked. Perhaps a stare or something like that. We won't know until we arrest him. The victim of this cannot tell us exactly what he did wrong. He said all of a sudden I was attacked. So we're looking for this man. He has a bad guy. He's indicted for a gun case as well in Brooklyn. So we're seeking him now. Anybody has any information, if you see him, please call 911. If you know where he is, please call the TIPS number. Thanks so much.
That's it, Bob? Okay, questions about crime? Tony?
For Chief Boyce, for Chief Shea, rather. You mentioned, we talked about the rate figures of the increase that you've seen
Yeah.
year to year and month to month, I suppose. Have you given any more thought as to whether, it's a two-part question, any more thought to whether the increase we're seeing in the complaints that are coming to your attention been sparked by the very popular things in the press about Harvey Weinstein and all those other related cases? And also, in terms of your investigation of the rapes complaints you're seeing, what proportion are coming in as unfounded?
I'll start with the first part. So 6 months in a row now. I believe that's beginning in September. And again, September was near even, but it was up. And any increase is not good. Once we hit October, and that seems to coincide with the increased media attention for a variety of issues with movements that are going on. That would lend itself to me, I've said before, I think it makes sense that the increase has at least partly to do to that. I think that when we speak to advocates, and I think we have as recently as this week, some that's viewed as a good thing. The fact that people are coming forward now, getting their voice, making the reports. I am of the opinion that these incidents were happening before, it's just not reported. Very difficult to quantify that, but that is my belief. So when you look at the increase, it's that last quarter, just before the last quarter last year, and it's not an insignificant increase. Double-digit increases essentially month over month, which brings us to where we are now. When you look at the numbers, I could go on with the statistics. I mean, when you look at the month of February alone, I think it was 33% that were occurring outside of this year. That is way off the charts what we normally see. I usually quote the number about 20% of the rapes occur outside of the current year. Last year, it was about 17, 18%, a little low, but that number moves. When we see a month with 33% of the rapes, and within that, we're getting a double-digit number that are being reported over 5 years old. So everything seems to point towards more people coming forward. And until I have anything to hold on to disputing that, that seems to be what's occurring to me. Second part of the question, when you referred to the unfounded rapes, I don't have numbers in front of me, but it is a small percentage of the overall rapes. And once we have an unfounded rape, then it would come off the books. So any numbers that I'm quoting you today would not be in that category.
Tom?
In regards to transit crimes, particularly public lewdness cases, either you or maybe Chief Del Torre could comment. We're seeing an increase in those cases from year to year, and we're just wondering what, how that is qualified, and also if recidivists are part of that situation.
So when you look at 2017, and I'll go more recent, 2018, for the first 2 months of this year, I said transit crime is down this year. And some good news on the sex crime related, although we have much more work to do in terms of transit. When you look at the transit misdemeanor sex crimes, they are actually down this year. When you mention public lewdness as one of those crimes, in transit, that is down for the first 2 months of this year. But let me be very clear, down is not good when you still have X number. There is still much work to be done. And what we continue to see in transit in particular, recidivism definitely plagues the transit system. And there's some work underway.
Transit squad, too.
Eddie Della Torre, the detectives assigned to the transit squad, identifying recidivists and what can be done to keep predatory individuals that continue to come on, whether it's pickpockets, whether in this case it's transit sex crimes, or whether it's somebody cutting pockets of sleeping passengers. Those three individual unique crimes to the transit system really plague the riders of the transit system. And we're going to continue to look to see any and all methods that we can explore to keep the riders safe. But when you talk about transit crime in particular, you're still talking about millions of riders with a very small amount of crime occurring on any individual day.
Are public lewdness arrests up this year? And how would you say the trend?
That we'll have to get back to you. I don't have that in front of me right now.
Gloria?
I have a question about following up on the city council hearing from last month about marijuana arrests.
Yep.
We looked at some of the data to follow up on what you had said, that because the reason there are more arrests in communities of color is because that's where the complaints are coming from. But the data we looked at did not bear that out. For example, we looked at East Harlem last year. There were 304 complaints to 311, but only 683 arrests.
Right.
In the Upper East Side, there were 123 complaints, but only 63 arrests. So I just wanted to get your response to that and see if there's any other information that the department is looking at or will be providing on this.
Yep. So the first part, what I said at the city council was that when you look at the marijuana arrests that are affected in New York City, and let me just, a little history here to have the full scope. 2011, we peaked with the number of marijuana arrests that the New York City Police Department affected. Over 51,000 in 2011. In 2013, that number dropped to 29,000, and I'm rounding. In 2017, it was under 18,000. When you look at those three time periods, from 2011 to 2017, we've dropped 65% for a variety of reasons. When you look just the last 4 years, from 2013 to 2017, it's a 35% reduction. So we are already, as we do with any other crime occurring in New York City, we evaluate what is occurring, how it affects the public, how it affects our resources at the time, of course that can't be ignored, and how it fits into the overall crime picture of New York City. So we have already significantly adapted our response. Now to the follow-up on that, at the City Council hearing, I talked about the top 15, and this is what was missing in some of the articles that were published. The top 15, when you look at precincts where these arrests are affected, and then you overlay that with the top 15 commands for complaints, and here's the piece that was missing. It matched up, or with significant spikes in complaints. You mentioned East Harlem, 2-5 precinct I'll mention, and there is always some outliers. When you look at the 2-5 precinct and you look at 9/11 calls in 2013, 302, I think that was in the article, and you look 4 years ahead to 2017, it's now at 402, an increase of 33%. Significant increase. When you look at the 2-5, that does not fall into the top 15 commands for calls, but it is a significant increase in calls nonetheless that we will and continue to address. I am very comfortable with our enforcement actions to date, and that's not to say that it is not constantly something that's under review. And like other crimes and other resources that we expend, we are always looking to get smarter, more efficient, and fairer, quite frankly. But the calls cannot be ignored at the same time. So when you look at 311, and I went over this, it is not a simple task to pull out some of the statistics. When you look at 311 and 911 calls regarding marijuana or weed or any of the other variety of ways that those calls come over, there is no getting around the fact that we are seeing an increase, and we have an increase in both 311 and 911 calls that coincides with a decrease in the arrest enforcement. And how we balance that is the key. So when I'm looking at Rodney Harrison on the patrol side with neighborhood policing, I think we are doing a very good job of balancing our enforcement efforts and managing the overall crime picture of New York City. But we also have to be responsive to people that are calling. I can tell you that since that City Council hearing, I have received personal email from people in parts of the city saying, thank you for what you said. So that's another side that's not often heard. Just this week, we had 5 people arrested with guns. At the same time, marijuana came into play. So all of this is something that we look at. We are never done. We're not done pushing crime down. We're not done evaluating our enforcement efforts. But right now, I'll say that I am comfortable in the statements of that day. And in terms of some of the published reports, we're missing the spike piece. Our arrests line up with where the complaints are coming in or conditions that are being reported to us that need to be addressed.
So, Gloria, I want to just jump in. You're certainly going to, I think it's important to look precinct by precinct. You'll certainly see some variations. Some where the level of arrest is very consistent with number of calls, some where there's variation, and you'll see that change over time too. But I want to get to what I think are the core issues here. First, equity. Unquestionably, anyone who says we want to make sure that the arrests are handled the same in communities of all different backgrounds, they're absolutely right. That is the vision of this department and this administration, and we're going to keep driving that vision. But the big picture also is the reduction in arrests. This whole discussion, very fair discussion, has to be looked at, in my view, against the backdrop where arrest levels overall are steadily declining. And as Dermot said, arrest levels for marijuana possession are down substantially in the last 4 years look at the average per year in the Giuliani administration, in the Bloomberg administration. Clearly, this is a sustained trend where we have brought those numbers down a lot compared to the previous 20 years, and we'll keep doing that. So I think what's happening now is very much moving in the right direction. I also want to remind you that the complaints are one of the ways that the activity is generated, but with neighborhood policing, to pick up on Dermot's point, if people are telling their neighborhood policing officer about something they'd like followed up on, not calling 311, but actually going directly to the officer they have a personal relationship with, that's a different way of getting that information and acting on it. And I think that's happening more and more. I think that's very healthy.
And if I may just follow up, there's a Congressman Crowley is sponsoring a bill called the Federal Marijuana Act, and it would legalize marijuana at the federal level and expunge federal convictions for marijuana use or possession. I'm wondering if you'd be in support of something like that, or if you could just comment on the congressman's sponsoring of this bill.
I'm going to start for all of us and say I haven't seen that bill, and so I don't want to comment on any bill I haven't seen. I think the world of Joe Crowley. I think he's a great leader, but I have not seen the bill.
Any more crime-related questions? Tina?
What do investigators think caused the crash in Parkland? Caused that crash? Will be charges?
All right, so there's no more questions related to the February crime stats? Do you have anything? All right, Tina. Tom Chan?
March the 5th, approximately 12:40 hours in the afternoon, in the confines of the 78th Precinct, we had a vehicle that was stopped at a red light, at a red signal light, going westbound on 9th Street at the intersection of 5th Avenue. Apparently, the motor vehicle operator suffered a medical episode. Vehicle number 1 then proceeded through the intersection, through the red signal, subsequently struck several pedestrians crossing at that particular intersection at 9th Street, continued westbound on 9th Street for approximately over 300-something feet, crossing over into the eastbound lane of travel, striking parked vehicles at that location. The pedestrians certainly were removed to the hospital, and the 2 of them were pronounced dead at the scene. The other 2 resulted in life-threatening injuries. And first and foremost, I'd like to say that that we want to extend our condolences to the Blumenstein and also the Liu family. Any life lost in a traffic fatality is bad, but our children are our most valuable treasures in our lives, and to lose these 2 children, I think that all New Yorkers feel for this particular family. This particular time, we've worked very closely with the Brooklyn DA's office. They were on the scene working hand in hand with us. ADA Craig Eswan was on the scene with our officers. We've been in contact also with the Vehicular Crimes Bureau Chief on this particular matter. We've ascertained a warrant for the blood of the individual, the operator of the vehicle. We also have ascertained cell phone warrants. There were 2 cell phones that we were able to procure. We are currently looking at medical records of this particular individual. We are ascertaining those records at this particular time. Also, that we take a look at the blood levels, and when we take a look at the current license of the individual, we work closely with the New York State DMV. Her license is currently been suspended as of now, and certainly it's going to be reviewed in the future. This particular time, our CIS and also the Brooklyn DA's office is conducting a joint investigation into this particular matter.
Okay, let me jump in on this, and I am not a lawyer, but I want to speak for my community. I was at the site of this crash and spoke to community members, and again today, and people are absolutely mortified by what happened here, and it's deeply, deeply troubling, and something is wrong with our laws that we need to fix. And I will come back next week with some specific ideas on what needs to be fixed. But from what we know so far, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not a police officer, I'm going to speak as a community resident. This should never have happened. She should never have been allowed to be driving a car after what we know of these other violations. I share the frustration of many in my community. I wish she was under arrest right now. I certainly believe that measures need to be taken to make sure she will not drive a car anymore. So I understand there's subtleties and specifics here, and I understand there's laws and procedures that have to be followed, but I just want to speak from the heart. This is just terrifying what happened to these children, and it should never happen again.
David?
Chief Chen, in the review of the medical records, has anything come out that would indicate that a doctor or any other medical professional had told her she should not be driving or cannot drive?
That's too early. And again, we ascertained the warrants just the other day, so we're in the process of getting these particular medical records.
Has she had seizures before that you're aware of?
I'm not going to comment on the very specifics on her medical condition.
John?
Chief, as far as her former driving record, I know she's been cited for red light cameras and speed cameras, but did she have any contact with police officers and issued tickets while she was driving?
We have, as it indicated, there are 4 instances where she received, on the vehicle itself, received red light summonses, 3 in Brooklyn and 1 in Queens. There were also 4 summonses that were issued for speeding in a school zone, and that was in Staten Island 1, Queens 1, and also Brooklyn 2. But again, through those programs in terms of issuance of summonses, the summonses are going to go to the specific owner of the vehicle and not necessarily the operator of the vehicle.
Any tickets issued by the, like police contact? She doesn't have any tickets issued by the PD itself?
There were some parking summonses that were issued to the vehicle itself, but we do not have any independent summonses.
Chief, you said at the beginning, I think, of that brief that she had an apparent medical. What's the evidence of that she had an apparent medical episode?
We have independent witnesses, and also currently the individual has been admitted to the hospital. She's currently in the hospital, and it was as a result of some type of medical condition, which we're in the process of verifying from her medical records.
She's spoken to NYPD representatives, the DA?
She has spoken to some of our investigators on the scene and also at the hospital.
Yep.
Mayor, on the topic of police discipline and transparency, I know you've said in the past that the city won't be able to divulge any more information about those subjects until 50A is changed in Albany. I guess I want to make sure that you still feel that way. And also, I wanted to ask, we're well into the legislative session. The negotiations over the budget, which often include large issues like this, are underway. What have you done to lobby for the change in 50A you say you want in Albany?
My team and I have raised it repeatedly in Albany, including at my budget testimony and in private conversations with a number of legislators, a number of leaders in Albany. We've been talking about this now intensely, publicly, for the last year or more. There's no one in Albany that doesn't know this issue is on the front burner. And if they pretend they've not heard about it, they're not telling you the truth. It's time to decide. And let's face it, there's been a power dynamic in Albany where this disclosure has not been politically acceptable. And it's often been Democrats and Republicans both because of where their political support comes from. So I think we need to get real about this. This disclosure is something the public is demanding and they have a right to. In the meantime, within the law, we'll disclose anything appropriate within the law.
Can you give me a sense of, you've publicly supported this. Governor Cuomo has said that he supports releasing these records. Is the holdup in the legislature, and do you see any chance of it getting through this year? You're trying to work around some of those political realities.
We're always trying, and I'd like to believe that justice will be served. This should be a nonpartisan issue. This should be an issue. It doesn't matter what part of the state you come from. When you hear people like Jimmy O'Neill and Bill Bratton before him saying they want this, I don't know what else there is to ask. These are the greatest police leaders in America. What else do you need to know? So if it is political, we'll still fight for the change, and I would hope a lot of folks who care deeply about police-community relations would speak up in these next weeks leading up to the budget, and then all through the rest of the legislative session into June. I mean, if you're out there, if you're a activist, if you're a community resident, if you're an editorial board, and you care about this issue, you better speak up. because otherwise, some people in Albany would love to look the other way. So we're going to fight for it this year, and if we don't succeed, I suspect there's going to be some real changes in Albany after this election, and there may be another opportunity after that.
I'm going to just jump in for a second, and I've gone on record saying that I'm definitely in favor of changes to 50A, and it's important. Anytime I speak about crime in the city, I speak about neighborhood policing, I speak about trust, and I think this is an issue of trust. People have to, our disciplinary system has to become more transparent. Obviously not totally transparent. There are some safety issues here. Police officers' home addresses and contact information, that has to be obviously not released. But this 50A is causing problems for the NYPD. It's not helping us move forward in certain areas. So there's many things we do well in the NYPD. We fight crime well, neighborhood policing is going well. Letting people know about our internal disciplinary process, that's not something that we do very well at all. If you read the newspaper or if you watch TV, you would think that police officers, NYPD officers, there's no discipline, and nothing could be further from the truth. Since 2014, there have been 362 officers that have either been terminated or left with disciplinary proceedings pending. 199 of them were forced out or terminated, and 163 resigned pending with discipline pending. So this discipline could be anything from a verbal reprimand by the sergeant to a supervisor complaint report, a command discipline. It could be charges and specs. It could be charges and specs plus dismissal probation. And in some instances, unfortunately, it's dismissal from the department. A lot of time and effort is put into training our police officers. And some people, and there's 36,000 cops, and we recruit from the human race. Some of those 36,000 do not deserve to wear a shield, the NYPD shield of the uniform, and we do our best to make sure that they are terminated from the police department so we can move forward in continuing to keep this great city safe. Dean.
So following up on that, obviously there was a report this week about officers between 2011 and 2015 who possibly committed offenses or crimes that they should have been fired, but they were just given probation. Your reaction to that when they list the officers that sexually assaulted people or touched people, sold drugs?
Yeah, Dean, and I saw the article, and as I said in my opening statement, we are open to criticism. That's part of who we are. I have no issue with that, but I think the full story needs to be told. I mean, each and every one of those cases is fully investigated. A punishment is doled out, and it's not just dismissal probation. If you're dismissal probation, that's part and parcel of another punishment. It's usually 30, 60, 90 days, and transfer that 30, 60, 90 days to a dollar amount. You're talking $15,000, $30,000, $60,000. So this is the dismissal probation is part of the process. If we see in a police officer that there's the opportunity to get them back on the right track, but understand that dismissal probation, if you're on dismissal probation, now you can be fired without process. And we have terminated 16 police officers since 14 that have been on dismissal probation, and another 8 have been vested out, forced out. So this is something that we take extremely seriously. Disciplining NYPD officers is part of my responsibilities, and it's certainly here. We do it effectively, and we need to be more transparent about it, and I couldn't agree with you more.
One point on this. Dean, give me the dates on that recent information that came out, please.
2011 to 2015 that the organization was able to get records.
Okay. I haven't seen it, but let me speak to the obvious. So 2011, 2012, 2013, the organization was under different management. And first when Bill Bratton came in and then when Jimmy O'Neill took over, I think you need to judge by their leadership, which has been resolute and fair throughout. And I've been in the discussions where I've heard each of them speak about the decisions they made and why they made them. I think they call them as they see them. I can't speak to what happened before us, but I think it's quite clear they take discipline very, very seriously.
So, Commissioner, just to follow up on that, after reading that BuzzFeed report and knowing what you do in the department, you feel like no changes need to be made, your current practices remove the officers that deserve to be removed from the force, and there's nothing from that report that said to you we might need to do anything differently?
When I read the report, it said to me, make sure, and I do, I'm involved in all these disciplinary cases, and I know how important it is to make sure that we look at each and every one of them and make sure that whatever punishment is given, it's fair and it's consistent with what we've done in the past. So there's always something to learn. Tony?
Chief Boyce, about 3 weeks ago, there was a homicide in Queens. A young man he had video of him walking with 2 other people and coming in and out of the frame. There was some talk about MS-13 involvement in that.
Yeah, you're talking about the homicide of Oscar Hernandez. Happened in 107 Precinct. So there were 4 people in the car with him. 3 are in custody now. We're looking for 1 more person. So we're looking to get a conspiracy case. It appears to be gang-related at this point, and we'll go forward with that case. So 3 are in custody on other issues. There was a homicide upstate that 1 person is arrested for CPW outside of New York City, and also some people 2 people in Jersey were arrested. So we're putting that case together as we speak right now. What needs to get out is, out of the 4 persons we want to talk to in that car, 3 are in custody now. We're looking for 1 more person. So I'm not at liberty right now to say who they are. But that case is moving very quickly towards fruition. We're going to make those arrests very soon.
Yep.
I just wanted to get the mayor to clarify what you said you'd like to talk about changes to the law regarding the Brooklyn crash. Is that to prevent people like this from getting behind the wheel, or to ensure that there's punishment after the fact? What do you?
Of all the above. I mean, I'm going to come back next week with some very specific ideas, but I see a bunch of problems here. So first of all, if, God forbid, you have some kind of impairment, you shouldn't be driving. So where's the actual penalty? Where's the actual consequence if you go ahead and drive anyway? I'm not trying to be negative to someone who has something beyond their control, but maybe you shouldn't be driving a vehicle if you have that situation, or at least there has to be clear standard of what you have to do to report it and what action needs to be taken once you report it, and if you don't report it, what happens to you? And I don't think that's the case right now. I think a second question is, if we're getting all this information off the speed cameras, what can we do with it? Granted, as the commissioner explained to me yesterday, getting a car on a speed camera is not proof positive of who's driving the car. But if you get a car, and this is what my constituents in Park Slope were saying, they were outraged, and I agree with them. If you got a car with this many speeding tickets, this many times going through a stop sign, and we have that information, we need to be empowered to follow up on that. Now, right now, best of my understanding, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think the commissioner and the men and women of the NYPD are given the right to follow up on that under the law. I think we need to give them that power. And clearly, the consequences for motorists who kill people. That's an area where there's been a lot of concern. The families who have lost loved ones have really been fighting for tougher consequences. I agree with them. People who get behind the wheel of a car need to understand they have a weapon in their hands. Whether they mean it to be a weapon or not, it can turn into a weapon. And they have to take that responsibility very, very seriously. And there's too many people who don't. So one of the ways we educate people in our society is to show them very, very serious consequences. For years and years, drivers would kill another human being and it would be treated like, these things happen, no big deal. That's disgusting to me. So one of the ideas behind Vision Zero has been to create an atmosphere of consequence, whether it's a speeding ticket or a failure to yield ticket, or whether it's a speed camera going off. But I think we have to teach people that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. And if you might not be able to drive a car and you might kill another human being by accident, don't get behind the wheel to begin with.
How many placards have been seized since the mayor announced his crackdown regarding parking? And how many officers have been disciplined? I'm not asking about tickets, but internally in the department.
Tom, would you have that info? If not, we're going to have to get back to you.
I don't have it at hand right now.
We'll get back to you. Yep. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mike Case from Police here. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that since this current administration has come in power, the process has been working better. And we asked the department repeatedly for data to help us prove that point, tell that story. Do you think that at a minimum the department should release some sort of anonymized data that details the charges officers are facing,
use a case to help medics help that?
Within the law, yeah. But again, we have a law that we don't agree with. I want to be really blunt about this. We, the city of New York, I as mayor, Jimmy O'Neill as police commissioner, we do not agree with our current state law. We believe we should be allowed more transparency. We believe the people would like that transparency. Within the law, we should provide the composite information that we can provide. I've said that about 1,000 times. I think it should be, the current law doesn't work. So again, I'm not a lawyer, so let me be careful about it. I don't know every element of 50A, and there may be valid pieces. When we've talked about it, we're talking about the fact that it does not allow the NYPD to release disciplinary action information, again, with the commissioner's very important point, with confidentiality considerations like detailed information about officer expunged. But the fact that we cannot report to the people on the disciplinary action taken in the case of an individual officer, even though they're seeing all the facts of the case on television or in their newspapers or online all day long, that's untenable. So I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to you about every article and every paragraph in 50A, but we want the right to make disclosure, period.
No, just either change whatever helps us become more transparent, but I do have to say again that we have to make sure that we maintain, there are some serious safety concerns also.
Sir, is it your position that releasing even anonymized data would violate 50A?
We're working on that right now. We don't have a final decision on that. Solon?
Commissioner, your co-response teams of officers and clinicians currently approach members, people that are mentally ill pre-crisis. They don't respond directly to 911 calls.
Right.
I'm wondering if you'd like to see them actually respond to.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to build up that capacity and to see them put into the queue, but we'd have to make sure that obviously we get the people from Department of Mental Health, and also make sure we have the right people within the department to do that too. So I'd like to see them in the queue and at some point have them responding to jobs, but right now we don't have that capacity. We're looking to build on that capacity.
And for Chief Boyce, Harvey Weinstein was mentioned earlier. I know in December you said that you had 2 detectives on the West Coast looking into that. What's the status of that investigation?
We are still accumulating evidence. It's going very, very well. We have a lot of information. We have people who are getting ready to go to grand jury. I would ask you to talk to Cy Vance about that, DA Vance. It's his case right now. We've accumulated quite a bit of evidence, and I would ask you to ask him on his schedule where it goes forward.
Dean?
Any update on the, I guess, alleged robbery of a gas station this week where an off-duty officer shot and killed one person?
Ben, I don't know if the Force Investigation has an update?
Yeah.
Rodney? Yep.
Good afternoon. So on March 5th, around 10:30 p.m. at the corner of Remsen Avenue and Avenue D, 2 individuals went inside the establishment, 2 perpetrators, both armed with firearms. While one individual went inside the attendance booth, the other one stood outside, ironically enough, occupied by an off-duty member of service. So while the individuals egressed from the location, the officer exited his vehicle, identified himself as a police officer. As the individuals turned, he struck one of the individuals in the torso. The other individual fled, I want to say, eastbound on Avenue D, and we're continuing the investigation at this time. The investigation is still pending regarding where he was struck, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
The crash, the Brooklyn crash. Is this a state thing that you're going to have to be proposing in addition to all the other, in addition to your Albany agenda? What kept, and what you said about police officers not being able to go and enforce or talk to a person who has that amount of violations, what is it about the law that's keeping them right now from doing that?
So on the first part, is it state law? To the best of my knowledge so far, everything we'd have to do is via state law, but we'll look at that. As I'll turn to the commissioner, I'm simply saying to the best of my understanding, even when we have that kind of evidence of a pattern, there's not the kind of charge available to act on that evidence.
Again, I'd ask Larry Byrne if he could, to add to this. I think it's going to be something we're going to have to do through the state, maybe a notification process if anyone has multiple camera summonses.
Yes, I'm going to editorialize and say thank you for a thoughtful point. That amongst interesting penalties is if someone repeatedly goes through stop signs and repeatedly speeds and is caught with evidence repeatedly doing it, the seizure of the car could be an appropriate penalty. So I'm a non-lawyer, but I want to be provocative on purpose. We got to get serious about this stuff.
So as the commissioner and the mayor said, when we intercept speeding or running red lights with camera, it generally gives us the plate number, but rarely gives us information to identify the driver of the vehicle. So we summons the owner of the vehicle. As the mayor said, with a particular pattern and prerequisites, if a vehicle is a repeat, in effect, recidivist violator, either speeding in a school zone, running red lights, forfeiture of the vehicle is one penalty that could be incorporated into state law. Generally, most of the traffic offenses involving vehicles are state law offenses. It's not something the NYPD could change on its own, and I'm not even sure that it's something the city council could do. It needs to be addressed with the state legislature in Albany, but we're going to look at different proposals that can put more teeth in that element of it.
Does that mean that you can't even, as a police officer or detective, go to that person's house and say, hey, you've run 100 red lights and we have it on camera, we want to see what's going on here?
We can investigate and ask questions all the time. It's a rare instance where someone's going to say, yeah, I was driving the car those 4 times when I speeded through the school zone, if I don't know that you were the one driving the car. There's nothing that prevents us from trying to investigate. We just can't take action without evidence that you were the person behind the wheel of the car the 4 times we got you speeding in the school zone.
In the back row, Rich.
So Chief Chan said, I think, that some of the officers on scene talked to the individual who was behind the wheel and wonder whether by observation they thought that there was any impairment there. I understand they're doing blood tests and all that sort of thing, but by observation, did they sense that there was any impairment?
Again, it's a matter that's under investigation, and our police officers are not doctors and things of that nature, but we have some witnesses who were at the location who spotted the driver. And again, this is until we confirm this with medical records. There was an investigator indicated that the individual might have been foaming at the mouth. But again, we are not doctors. We're not going to make determinations. But there were observations by our officers. So again, we will bring that information to the DA and let them make that determination.
Ryan, last call.
Question, Commissioner. Since the TLC driver committed suicide outside the City Hall gate last month, for about the last 4 months, there have been an additional 4 NYPD officers stationed there on each side of the gate. My understanding is typically when you change security after events, it's generally not for such a long period of time. So I'm just wondering kind of what the thinking is there, what the motivation for the extra security is.
So this is a determination that's made by the Intelligence Bureau in conjunction with the Counterterrorism Bureau. So I'm not going to speak exactly why we have additional officers there. That's a determination that was made.
Were there any specific threats made regarding City Hall?
I'm not going to comment on that. Colleen?
This isn't necessarily a crime, but it's like law enforcement. So the
That qualifies.
That's
right.
Department yesterday to California over the sanctuary city laws, and I just wondered, some of their laws are similar to city laws.
Right.
I wondered if you're anticipating any kind of similar legal action, if you're concerned, how you proceed from here.
We are resolute. I reminded you guys that a week or 2 after the election of 2016, I sat in Trump Tower with President Trump and then Senator Sessions, and I described how our law worked, how we had 170 major crimes, serious and violent crimes, where we cooperated with ICE and we did not cooperate otherwise, and I explained that this was based on the interests of public safety in New York City. And I said to them, you know, if you don't want to talk to a Democratic elected official about it, go talk to Commissioner O'Neill, go talk to his predecessor, Commissioner Bratton. They will explain to you why this has been part of keeping the people in New York City safe, that we've had this open door relationship between our police and our communities, including all of our immigrant communities, including 500,000 people who are undocumented in this town. We stand by that. And we believe everything we have done conforms with the Constitution. So if they're suing the state of California, I believe the Justice Department will lose. I have a lot of respect for what they're doing in California. And if they come our way, I believe they'll lose as well. Okay, last call on police related.
How many more news conferences for Steve Davis?
Depends what happens in March. Depends what happens in March. This I think, is your last crime press briefing, right? And that's not a smile on his face. Thank you for laughing, Colleen.
We'll miss you.
That was sweet. Steve, that's the nicest thing he ever said about you.
Most of you also.
Oh, beautifully done. Beautifully done. Diplomatic at all times. Okay, other topics. Yes, David.
So, Cynthia Nixon has been a big supporter of yours, held fundraisers, both in your first go-around and then in re-election.
Oh, wait, a lot of people are leaving. Let's just give them a second. I'm sorry. You'll get for. I'm happy for you. Get Monahan out of here. Yeah.
He doesn't need a microphone.
I'll never mic him up. And David.
Okay, so Cynthia Nixon has been a major supporter of yours, a loyal supporter of yours for a long time. Her partner works in City Hall for you.
She works in the Department of Education.
Well, she works in the city government.
Right.
She's often seen at City Hall, I'll say.
Many people are often seen at City Hall. Continue.
This is true. The governor suggested earlier today that you may have had some role in encouraging her to run. Did you or any of your staff have any conversations with either Cynthia Nixon or the consultants that are working with her about her running for governor?
Let me be really clear about this. I have a long, wonderful relationship with Cynthia Nixon. I have tremendous respect for her. I got to know her as an education activist. She's been one of the strongest voices in the state, standing up for the rights of children all over the city, all over the state, because she's advocated for the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which we're still waiting. We're still waiting for justice in the Campaign for Fiscal Equity case, and that's over a decade ago. It was decided by the highest court in New York State. So that's how I got to know her. I've gotten to know her better over the years. She's extraordinary, and obviously in her career, she's achieved great things as well. She's a strong, independent woman who makes her own decisions. So this is something you'll have to ask her what her choice is. Whatever she does, it's her own choice. It's as simple as that. And I haven't spoken to her in a while. I'm not going to go into any private conversations with a friend, obviously. But whatever she does, she's going to be a politically active person. She always has been.
So that's not a no.
Again, I'm not going to talk about private conversations with a friend.
Do you think that the Russians had any involvement?
I think it's very important you call Vladimir Putin directly to ask him. I've said to you guys before, I'm not going to get into the 2018 state elections just now. At some point, I'll speak to them, but I'm not going to talk to them now. Go ahead.
It seems like you spoke to them very briefly, at least with Nomiki Coates, who spoke to you recently. Do you think the governor should face some kind of primary challenge?
Look, I think something's happening all over the country that we should pay attention to. Democrats are rising up, and progressives are rising up, and they want change. This is a national phenomenon. The erstwhile New York Times newspaper, front page above the fold, upper right-hand corner earlier in the week, talked about challenges that are happening to incumbent Democrats all over the country, because the progressives in the party are ascendant and want to see a Democratic Party that is true to its original values. So I'm just not surprised by it. Yeah, Rich.
Do you see Governor Cuomo as a progressive?
Look, I obviously have real political differences with the governor, and I'm very uncomfortable with how he's handled the Republican State Senate and the IDC, for example, and I've made that clear before. I just think in the end, there's a reckoning occurring all over this nation in our party. It's time for Democrats to be Democrats. I remember what Howard Dean said a long time ago in 2004. It was one of the best lines I've heard in a long time. He said, "I'm from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party." Well, so am I, and I want to see real Democrats. Again, I've just made a statement about what I view, what I believe.
You were quite close with Jeff Klein for a while, and I'm wondering what kind of changed.
I wouldn't say quite close. I would say that we did some good work together. And look, I wish he had never left the Democratic Party. He's a very talented guy. And I think if he had stayed in the party and stayed in the party's conference, he would have continued to advance. I've said that to him many a time. And I've also said the IDC should come home right now. The fact is, in 2014, when I worked for pre-K for all the kids in New York City, I thought he was helpful. But it's just beyond the pale that the IDC has not come back. They could do it at any moment. And the only reason they're not is some kind of self-interest, which makes no sense to me. You're either a Democrat or you're not. Yes?
So the Working Families Party has endorsed some IDC challengers. One of them is your former aide, Jessica Ramos. I'm wondering if you plan on endorsing any IDC challengers.
I'll certainly consider that. The decisions about the 2014 state elections are upcoming. Again, I'll speak to them when I'm ready, but I'm very uncomfortable with what the IDC is doing. And, I've been saying it now for weeks, and I think a lot of Democrats are feeling the exact same thing. You're either with us or you're against us. If you're an IDC member, you are part of the Republican majority of Donald Trump's Republican Party, period. If you want to cleanse that situation, get home right now. Otherwise, you will suffer the consequences. As simple as that. Please.
Help the governors and the Working Families Party.
That is a true statement.
Do you see yourself doing that again?
You are a creative thinker.
Mayor, the Governor's Council, Alfonso David, sent a letter to the City Council late last month suggesting some strategies for what they think would be the best way to solve some of New York City's problems in the upcoming state budget. Among them is a suggestion that the city should ask for legislative approval for design build for specific projects rather than a broader authority or a bunch of projects all at once. And they said the governor's office would support design build for Rikers, for NYCHA, and for the BQE. What do you think of that approach?
I think design build, which the state grants itself to save the taxpayers ultimately billions of dollars and a lot of time on major construction projects. I don't understand why on earth the state government wouldn't want the biggest city in the country to have that too. We are 43% of the state's population. Why on earth wouldn't they want New York City to also save a lot of money and have these projects go a lot quicker? So of course it should be across the board. If you said to me there's some specific projects they would approve right away, would I take that? Yeah, I'll take anything I can get, but it just doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be broad approval. Go ahead. Anyone else hasn't gone yet? Yoav and then Marcia.
I just wanted to clarify what your wife's role is as far as it comes to Thrive New York City.
Sure.
Is that one more of kind of advocacy, or does she set policy? Does she have any say in how the money for that is being allocated?
I think it's abundantly clear. We've spoken to it many times. She is leading the effort. And again, I'm more than confused and more than surprised at this newfound interest on something we've been talking about now for 4 years, right out in the open, but suddenly it's a meme. You'll have an opportunity to ask her yourself. She was sitting there the other day. Anyone could ask her anything. You'll have an opportunity to ask her yourself. But I'll speak only to this extent to say, from day one, we said she was leading this effort. She convened the meetings. She worked with all the different commissioners to design the model, to determine what the budget would be, and to oversee the implementation, and then to spread the model so that it would work at the grassroots, which is things like the Weekends of Faith, which have been very successful, getting clergy of all backgrounds to buy into this and be a part of it. She's been a part of every step along the way in great detail, and she's leading the effort. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Marcia. Marcia first.
Mary, there's been talk of Shirlane running for office. She, in fact, is in a Cosmopolitan interview said she would consider it. I wonder what offices you think you'd like to see her run for and she'd be good at.
Again, I believe that it is not the place of a spouse to speak to their spouse's choices. She will decide what she's going to do. And she said that was one of many things that she might do, but she didn't define it because I don't think she's made any decisions, to say the least, but you'd have to ask her.
Also, would you like to see her run for elected office?
I think she's extraordinarily talented. I think she could do a lot of good in the world, whatever she does. But again, it's not my place. I think a lot of men should know what their place is and what their place isn't. It's not my place to speak for her. She will speak for herself.
Just curious, is she legally allowed to draw a salary from the city?
No. This has been established many times over. Ask the people who wrote the laws. I don't understand it either. She works full-time. It makes no sense to me, but that's the reality.
Change in the charter?
It's a great question. I don't know the origin. Obviously, you know, the parallel was Bloomberg with his sister and I think his daughter, both. I don't understand it because if someone's working full-time and is a professional with a lot of background and applying themselves, I don't understand why they can't get paid, but she can't get paid. So she's doing it volunteer, but she's doing it 110%. Again, ask the people who wrote the law. Go ahead, Yoav.
I guess I just wanted to challenge the premise of your statement that,
Please.
that we can ask your wife questions because when she appears with you, I guess she's sometimes available for questions, but when she appears on her own, as far as I know, I don't believe she's ever allowed questions.
Sure, she's taken questions many times. Don't, respectfully, my friend, check your facts before you issue your statement. She's held a number of press conferences on a number of topics where people could have asked her anything they wanted. A lot of times those have not been attended, even though they were open to all. She sat with me on recent announcements where you could have asked anything you wanted. Medina, didn't you do an in-depth interview with her a few weeks ago? Someone wants to do an in-depth interview? Talk to her team. It's very, very clear. And by the way, I was at the Thrive press conference where we announced, the big strands of Thrive. You could ask her anything you wanted about it. So she's leading one of the most important initiatives of this administration, which is working and having a big impact. Also being copied around the country, which is fantastic because it's part of how we change the whole national dynamic on mental health and ultimately get better legislation in Washington. She's doing great work with the Mayor's Fund. She's doing great work on domestic violence, combating domestic violence. Supporting LGBT youth. There's many, many things she's doing, and you'll certainly have, as you always have had, ample opportunity to ask her, but I'm not going to speak for her. I'll take these last two and I'm out.
I know that you don't seem to feel that Governor Cuomo is a real Democrat. Would you like to see a primary challenge, but not only a primary challenge, but a third-party challenge like the Working Families Party or another challenge?
I'm a Democrat. I want to see the Democratic Party stay true to its roots. I'm not speculating. That's what I feel. Go ahead, Joy.
I just want to go back to Vladimir Putin.
Yes. Do you have a relationship with him? Can you reach him? Because someone's got to ask him directly.
Quite close. It was the governor who suggested that it was either him or you
Yeah.
who put Cynthia Nixon in the mix. So I just wanted to get a more direct answer to that suggestion, and I have another tiny follow-up.
I don't understand. Do I know anything about Vladimir Putin? No.
Do you want to respond to the governor's
I
suggestion?
said very clearly, anyone who thinks that, let me say it this way. Cynthia Nixon makes up her own mind. She is a very accomplished person. She has very strong views. If you want to know what Cynthia Nixon is doing, ask her. On your second question?
Would you want Shirlane to be able to get a salary from?
Look, I think if someone is working full-time in a world where you have two-income families now as the norm, And, you know, two people who have been doing this work for a long time, I find it strange that she's not allowed any compensation. And let's face it, this often affects women. In many, many cases, it is a man who holds public office and a woman who is his spouse, who has a lot of professional background, in a position to contribute. This is true all over the country, state level, city level. And if they're told they can't get any compensation, it's basically encouraging them not to play that public role and not to be involved on the big issues. If she hadn't done Thrive, it never would have happened. There's no two ways about it. If she had not been the leader of the Thrive initiative, it wouldn't have happened. And you know, there are days when close to 1,000 people call 888-NYC-WELL and get help. That would not have happened had she not stepped up. But she did it for free, and she had no choice. So, you know, I respect and understand why the law is in place. I really do. I think it's a fair point. There's good historical reasons for the law, but it has an unintended consequence, and it particularly hits women unfairly, in my view. Thanks, everyone.